bloodlust, Victorian yearning, cursed lineages. If you thought Bram Stoker's Dracula was bloodthirsty, its predecessor Olalla is sure to make your mouth water. Hi, I'm Iggy, and this is my take on the classic short story Olalla. Authored in 1885 by the R.L. Stevenson of Treasure Island and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde fame, Olalla is a wonderfully written book with all the florid flourishes you'd expect of Victorian-era literature. I mean, why use one sentence when five will do? But in a good way. You know, like the way we look back on the era for making everyday things beautiful for beauty's sake. Though for all that, the true beauty and horror of Olalla lies in what's not said, in the silence left for the mind to fill. So, let's see what our imaginations yield, eh? The story is told through the eyes of our narrator, a Scotsman who's convalescing in Spain after being wounded in the Napoleonic Peninsula Wars. His doctor recommends one of the most delightfully era-appropriate medical treatments: time in the Spanish countryside to renew the blood. It's the kind of prescription that's only topped by a dose of sea air to detox the humours. Or, of course, manual stimulation to cure that pesky lady hysteria. As it happens, our good doctor knows a priest who knows a family with a country house. The family consists of a mother, the Señora, and her two adult kids, son Felipe and daughter Olalla. The doctor tells our narrator this is a noble family with a long aristocratic lineage, though one that's in decline from inbreeding and corruption, or very House of Dragons. They're a proud but destitute bunch. As such, they'll deign to take his lodging rent, but please don't try and mingle, thank you very much. Narrator hears snobby aristocrats and thinks to himself,
challenge accepted.
He reckons he'll be able to charm his way into their good graces. No wuckers. It's giving clout chaser, and the impression this strange family may not be our biggest problem. Although maybe the narrator's confidence isn't entirely unearned, because the doctor gushes that if the family only knew how dashingly handsome and incredibly nice he was, maybe they'd not be so standoffish. Anyway, it's settled, and the next day he's picked up by Felipe to head off to the Residencia. On their journey, narrator notices Felipe is dusky and hairy, two traits he doesn't like, but he's otherwise a physical specimen of a man, super well built and still muscly. It's just that, well, his mind, it ain't fully developed. Felipe's childlike, talking in a semi-nonsensical way and singing strange little made-up tunes. His eyes, though, they're strikingly golden. The two travellers arrive at the Residencia in the evening. It's a grand house, looming in the darkness among the mountains. Our narrator is greatly impressed. The narrator is led through a courtyard, up some stairs, and through a gallery to his room. When he arrives, there's food and wine laid out for him. He pours himself some wine and offers some to Felipe, who's disgusted at the thought. Narrator starts asking after the Señora, though Felipe proves cunningly adept at dodging these questions, and he quickly exits stage left. Now alone in his room, narrator notices a portrait of a woman. She's red-headed, golden-eyed, richly dressed. Her beautiful face shows she's got a real attitude, the kind that would eat you alive. In what can only be described as immaculate foreshadowing, our narrator becomes obsessed with this portrait. He all but straight up admits to staring into her eyes and jerking it. He's so deeply infatuated that he's a little scared this woman might rise from the grave. Perhaps not literally, but at least in the body of one of her descendants, who may be around the house at this very minute. First glance, this whole section reads like Victorian purple prose, but there's actually some quiet revelations unfolding. Namely that this guy falls in love with his own projections. After a couple of days at the Residencia, he meets the Señora. She's gorgeous, and the narrator can see the strong family resemblance with both the painted eye candy in his room and Felipe. The Señora's eyes, though, they're not right. Large, golden, vacant, and with pupils so dilated they're almost entirely black. During the day, she lounges around, luxuriating in the sunshine and chasing it through the courtyard as the day progresses. She's pleasant enough and chit-chats, but basically only gives the shallow platitudes of a contented cow chewing their cud. The Señora's blissed out, uninterested, unbothered, warming herself in the Spanish sun, and this seemingly perpetual state of nirvana chafes at the narrator. When he's not engaging with the Señora, our guy whiles away the time taking long daily walks in the woods around the Residencia. It apparently works wonders for restoring his health. Felipe potters about, working away on the property's farm. One arvo, the narrator asks him to join him on a ramble. Felipe's delighted and kind of bounding along with the enthusiasm of a hyper-stimulated child, using all the swiftness and agility of an able and fine-bodied man. The narrator's shocked to see Felipe dash up a tree, catch a squirrel, and torture it. Philippe himself squealing in delight the whole time. For all Philippe's physical magnificence, his bestial instinct is in control of the moment. Understandably grossed out, narrator grabs the squirrel and puts the poor thing out of its misery, then severely chastises Philippe by gripping him to show dominance. This apparently earns Philippe's adoration, and now the narrator's got a pet. And so, after successfully worming his way into the good graces of 2 of 3 of the family members, narrator starts to wonder about the elusive Olalla. One morning, the narrator wakes up to a foul storm buffeting the mountainous mansion. He tries to take his usual walk, but is beaten back by the horrendous weather. It's the kind of atmosphere that's unnerving, and he's thoroughly on edge. Apparently, it's affecting everyone. When Philippe comes with dinner, he's jumpy and cursing the storm. Disquieted, the narrator goes looking for some sort of company. He's drawn to a room in the gallery where there's a roaring fire. He sees the Señora and she's pacing to and fro, jerking her arms around and cursing to the sky. This erratic behaviour elicits a quick nope out of there before she can clock the narrator. He returns to his room so he can try sleep through it, but he's soon awoken by blood-curdling screams. We never find out exactly what's happening, but we're told those screams are too bestial to be human, but too human to be a beast. The narrator panics and rushes to investigate what he imagines might be tortures being meted out to mentally compromised members of the family he's now obsessed with. Much to his dismay and annoyance, he finds the door's been locked from the outside, but there's not much he can do about it. For now. The next day dawns clear and picturesque. A clean slate, the Señora and Philippe are going about as if nothing happened. Philippe's out farming and the Señora is sleeping in the courtyard. Narrator takes his host's inattentiveness as an opportunity to snoop around the Residencia. Inside, he finds aristocratic grandeur in decay. He fixates on the many portraits of long-dead members of a once clearly illustrious house, one that ruled vast lands, held high offices, and had kings calling them family. Seeing generation after generation of inherited features reflecting those of his beloved portraits strikes awe in the narrator. He can conceptualize the proud lineage, not just in the abstract, but before his very eyes. It's intoxicating. Eventually, narrator's snooping leads him to a room that's clearly inhabited but very austere. He creeps up on a desk with some rough but beautifully composed poetry. Though not just any poetry, the stuff was a vision of piety. Narrator knows there's no way either the Señora or Philippe have the mental capacity to have written this, which means it must be Olalla's work. He decides right there and then Olalla must possess a saintly character to have written such poems. She's clearly a rose among thorns. He feels abashed at having encroached on her space and leaves with his tail between his legs. He's kind of unsure of what to do with the preternatural sounds he heard last night. He's also kind of embarrassed to think that this saintly woman could have any part in the types of scenes he was conjuring up in his head. This guy turns on a dime. One minute he's up in arms about potential torture, the next he's waving off those screams because no one horrible could write nice poetry. Narrator doesn't have to live with the cognitive dissonance for too long, because the priest comes to check in on the Residencia. The narrator confesses his experience, and from the reaction of the priest, he clearly knows something is up. But after huffing on some snuff, he basically says, best to just stay in your lane, buddy. Our guy loves being told not to worry by a priest. It absolves him from having to intervene in any less than moral debauchery he might encounter. He can just focus on his portrait and his growing fascination with the mysteriously pious third family member. Mysterious for not much longer though. The next day the narrator returns from his walk, and as he comes through the gallery, who should be there but Olalla. The second narrator claps his eyes on her, he's struck dumb. She's clearly a product of her lineage, her features consistent with all he's seen of her house, both living and painted. She's got the family's distinctive red hair and those striking golden eyes. She's fucking perfection. Their gazes meet with such intensity, he believes it's a sacramental wedding of their souls. It's all our boy can do but to give a little bow and beeline to his room. Ain't no doubt it's love at first sight. At least for the narrator. He and Olalla haven't even exchanged a word and he already thinks God personally introduced them. Narrator's so affected, the once vivacious portrait he's been yanking it to now seems devoid of life. And nothing compares to his new obsession, Olalla. Thoughts of her and what their future might look like consumes the narrator's every waking moment. But while he loves the idea of marrying her, he's not jazzed at the prospect of taking on her mentally stunted family. I'm sure most of us have wished we could cauterize a loved one from their malignant families. Anyway, the next day, the same thing happens. Narrator wants to talk to her, but his body again betrays him. He swears he can read her like a book, but all he can muster is another awkward little bow and straight to his room to ruminate. Riding the highest of highs for a brief encounter, he was white knighting the shit out of this. No way he could leave his damsel in distress to decay in obscurity. At the same time, narrator plunges to the depths of despair in Olalla's absence. Like an addict, our guy pins his entire existence on anticipating the slightest interaction with her. All this to say that when he doesn't see her the next day, he's beside himself. The day after though, OMG, the day after, he actually walks up to her. He gets so close he could reach out and touch her. On his approach, Olalla shies away, but her eyes remain locked on his. So there's no possible way Olalla doesn't feel that all-consuming pull, right? Right? No way to know, because our narrator becomes verbally impotent once again. He bows and makes a swift exit. On his walk the next day, the narrator stands on a knoll in the mountainous Spanish countryside overlooking the Residencia, and he's now contemplating how to solve the issue of not being able to talk to the love of his life. He suddenly becomes acutely aware of Olalla's presence. She's walking up to him with a calm, quiet, indefatigable strength. She finally speaks. She says, "You will go away. Today." The sound of her voice breaks the spell, and our 0 to 100 narrator now gushes out all his feelings and ardour. He's saying he'd renounce his country, his language, his friends, his soul, if only he could live by Olalla's side. While this is certainly an insanely dramatic response, I'm pretty into it. Kind of a breath of fresh air in the modern nonchalance-riddled dating era. Olalla hears narrator out, but her conviction remains. He's got to go. She turns away. In desperation, he calls Olalla's name and she runs to him and briefly holds him before pushing away and leaving for real. True to form, narrator is both shattered and elated. Like, sure, Olalla had told him to take a hike, but she'd also come when he'd called. He wasn't delusional, right? When he gets home, he finds a note in his room from Olalla, pretty much reiterating that she wants him to make himself scarce ASAP. Being a very rational dude, his response is to stick his hand through a window, slashing his wrist. Not for suicide reasons, but for "I'm hurt so I have to stay" reasons. Armed with his wound, he goes to find Felipe to assist with his injury. He sees the Señora and asks for her help, showing his messed up and bloodied wrist. At first, the Señora is passive. Then, her nostrils flare with the scent of blood. Her pupils, usually black and dilated, sharpen into little pinpricks. Golden irises blazing. She grabs his arm and bites down, right to the bone. By this time, narrator's lost a lot of blood, so he's a little bit woozy. He registers Felipe and Olalla arriving, and Felipe tackling the Señora and Olalla carrying him to his room. He also registers the cries coming from the Señora are a perfect match for those he heard in the storm. Olalla nurses the narrator, fussing over him. He's super aware of her presence as he drifts in and out of consciousness. Finally, after he's regained some strength, he tells her yet again he loves her. But now, it's Olalla's turn to talk. She explains she carries her family's curse, and it weighs heavy with all their villainy compounded through the ages. Now it's on her shoulders, she refuses to let inherited evil define the future. Because of what she's been born into, she doesn't have anything that's truly hers. No gesture, no feature, no mannerism that's not inherited from some evil forebearer. She loathes her blood and her bloodline, and so this shit ends with her. Narrator protests. How can she deny what's so clear? The soul bond they share, that they're meant to be. To deny their connection is basically to deny God. It's so apparent. She essentially says that while the narrator is cute, he doesn't figure into her plans. She can't think of personal happiness when her life isn't hers to give. Still crazy weak, the narrator is bundled up and shipped off to the nearest town to recover. While healing in town, narrator sees the priest again and asks point blank, what the fuck is up with that family? The priest admits he knows the family is messed up, but whatever they have, it's not madness or insanity, and it's beyond his knowledge. The one saving grace is Olalla, who alone doesn't exhibit the family taint. I guess that means Olalla is every bit as piously good as the narrator is built up in his head. The narrator falls into his usual habit of daily walks. The route around the town takes him to a clearing with a large crucifix from which he can see the Residencia. One evening, while gazing upon it, he chats to a peasant who ominously curses the place for being riddled with Satan's spawn. He tells the narrator the townsfolk won't abide living with such evil on their doorstep for much longer, and they plan to burn the Residencia and its inhabitants to the ground. Old school Spanish Inquisition styles. Naturally, the threat to his beloved Olalla distresses the narrator. He's gotta warn her. But whoa, speak of the devil, and the devil shall appear. Olalla arrives and for one last time tells him to go. She'll be glad to know that he lives on with her memory. She's fully aware death is in store, and she welcomes it. Her purpose is to die for her family's sins, a sacrifice that mirrors that of Jesus. And with this parallel, she's content with her destiny. Our guy, grief-stricken and tortured by unmet yearning, finally accepts defeat in love and walks away. Raise your hand if you too have been personally victimized by yearning for an avoidant redhead. Nowadays, there's so much juicy vampire media for our consumption. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking Anne Rice, Stephanie Meyer, True Blood, Castlevania, Blade. All of this is full frontal vamp. There's no mystery about what they are. It's more about flirting with backstories, wrestling with the morality of what it means to drink blood, and the different flavours of supernatural rules that might apply, like who gets to go outside during the day. In contrast, Olalla never goes to the level of, behold, a vampire. An outline is certainly drawn for us, but it's blurry and comes through the unreliable perspective of a dramatic, obsessive, and self-absorbed narrator who has questionable motives. But the picture is there for us to colour. We know we're working with a secretive, decaying aristocratic family with strange golden eyes and a penchant for torture and bloodlust. There are allusions to a family curse, but there's a degree of plausible deniability with the presence of inbreeding. The second Stevenson wrote, "They are vampires," the mystery would have died. Instead, he gives us just enough evidence to believe, and just enough doubt to keep us wondering. The silence for our minds to fill is where the horror lives. Of course, we've got to mention some, by today's standards, deliciously cliché vampiric accoutrement, like Gothic mansions, religious overtones, and a distrustful local population. But it's easy to recognise this scene setting with the benefit of all the vampiric lore that's been built on foundational stories like Olalla. Dracula may be more famous, but it certainly owes Olalla some rent. And that's all from me. Thank you.